morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This morning, I'm very thrilled and honored to have with me as my guest Boris Feldman, who's a partner at Freshfields. Boris, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I came prepared for this. First, I brought my Freshfields hat for the California office. And then because of your shoe motif, I brought a shoehorn in case you put me in any tight situation.
Well, you're the first guest who's ever made a pun on that, so I commend you for that at least. At least you have a sense of humor, so that's good. Well, Boris, let me start by asking you, you obviously practiced law for a very long time. Tell me a little bit about how you even, what was your interest that drew you into a legal profession to begin with?
I was very argumentative as a child. So even as an elementary schooler, my parents used to say, listen to him, the lawyer. So it's a warning to us all that we should watch what we say around our children, or it can have an impact on them.
And so is that really the reason that you went to law school? You were very argumentative and liked to win arguments?
I was programmed for it. So unlike some people who agonize over whether they should go to history graduate school or this or that, I always knew I was going to be a lawyer.
So it fits you like a glove, and you enjoyed it, and it worked out very well, I assume?
If the shoe fits, wear it.
Very nice. So let's see, you were obviously at one firm for a very long time, and then you recently made a move. Tell me a little bit about what attracted you and why you decided to make that move.
The COVID. So I'd been at Wilson, Sons, Zini, Goodrich, and Rosati for 33 wonderful years.
Yes.
I was very happy, and I used to say to people, this is the last law firm I'm ever going to work at. And I believe that. I think as with many people, during the lockdown, I had a chance to reflect, and fortuitously, friends of mine who had gone to Freshfields in New York reached out. Although I thought it was very low odds, I was willing to at least explore it a little bit, largely because of my friendship with those people. And in the end, I concluded it would be almost like a career reboot, and that my path had been settled in my prior professional life, and nothing was really going to change that much. One new matter, one fewer matter, but I was sort of defined, and this was an opportunity to reinvent myself with a different client base and a different set of colleagues and make new friends. I don't know if it would have happened in the ordinary course when everybody was in the office and you were sort of chugging along on what it is we do. But I think that being isolated gave me an opportunity to reflect and to think about, what do I want the next 10 years to look like?
Very interesting. And what is your conclusion so far? Is it too early to tell? What is your feeling so far?
Well, I joined the firm mainly so that I could travel and do a lot of photography in foreign cities. So from that perspective, it's been a complete failure. I've only had since lockdown, I've really only had one trip abroad to our London office. On the other hand, if you measure job satisfaction by daily happiness, it's been a home run. Or as we Brits like to say regarding cricket, it's been a bounder. I have fun every day. I learn new things every day. I meet clients from around the world that I might not have met before regularly. And it's given me a chance to grow as opposed to continue with inertia.
Well, it's nice to hear a good story that came out of COVID. Was it the fact that you didn't have a chance to interact with colleagues? I mean, did you find that you really missed that? Was that one of the motivations?
I think that to leave an institution one has been with for a long time, it's easier to do if you're remote from them. If the people you've had lunch with every day for 30 years are around you, harder to say goodbye. But if sort of everyone is off in their own bubble, it makes it easier to say, okay, I'll try something else. One of the things that has most surprised me about being at a new firm is the ability to make friends over a TV screen, which in general, as one ages, the conventional wisdom is it becomes harder to make new friends. And I certainly would have thought that without meals together or drinks together, it would have been impossible. But instead, I've made a number of friends at the firm in different offices, different practices unrelated to mine, that feel like real friends when I've gotten finally to meet them in person. Generally, I've been shocked by their height. On Zoom, it's like Lake Wobegon. On Zoom, everyone is 5'8". But when you meet them, sometimes they're 5'5" and sometimes they're 6'3". So that's been a surprise. But in general, when I've met them in person, I feel as if these are long-standing friends. And I think as a broader implication for the legal profession, some people are really good remote and others ain't. And obviously, we're going to re-engage in a real world, not just a virtual world, sometime soon, hopefully. But a big part of what we do will continue to be on TV screens.
Yes.
And I think that when you look at various groups of winners and losers from the COVID, I think there will be some lawyers who achieve great success because they are able to build client relationships remotely. In the old days, for some rainmakers, it was about golf and 3 martinis.
Yes.
I think as the torch passes to a younger and more diverse generation, some of the old timers who did well on a golf course may not be able to compete as effectively against younger lawyers who are really good at the TikTok generation. And so I think that as you go forward, 3 years from now, 5 years, 10 years from now, it may be that some of the stars at getting business among law firms will be people who've really gotten comfortable talking to a little blinking eye on top of a television.
Well, what do you think? I mean, in your assessment, it's an interesting observation. In your assessment, what do you think it takes to be able to make the connections by video? Have you been able to kind of?
No, I can't define it. It's not just a good question; it's the question.
Yes.
And I believe that in all service industries, whether it's law or consulting or placement or investment banking, they all have things other than services. But at their core, you're trying to convince a customer, a client, to hire you because of your skills. We're not selling shoes. No pun intended. Some of us are. But I don't know what defines that ability. And I've seen it. There are some people that own the room on a Zoom grid. And there are others that don't. I think there will be a lot of training in the profession now. We've started it at Freshfields about we've brought in consultants to help get people comfortable presenting online. But I think there's a lot to be learned there, but it may be one of those intangible factors, whereas just in the past, somebody could float into a crowded room and sort of light it up. I'm not sure that's the same skill set in the metaverse. So it's something we'll watch and learn from. But I actually can't define for you what gives someone that je ne sais quoi.
How do you think you're at? How would you grade yourself? Are you any good at it, or what would you say about yourself at doing?
No, I have unfair advantages. First of all, the bow tie connects with people on a very chromosomal level, because traditionally, what people wore bow ties? Obstetricians and gynecologists. So in a way, when you see this, it takes you back to your birth. So there's immediate resonance there. And then let's face it, it's hard to beat the hat. So this is a special Freshfields hat. It's bespoke. On one side, it says Freshfields. On the other, it has our icon. I think we're the only law firm with an icon. That's the Archangel Michael. And on the back, it has the year of the law firm's founding, 1743. So between the bow tie and the hat, I'm fine being on Zoom. and I don't golf. So in a way, my greatest disadvantage in the profession has now been eliminated.
Well, what do you think about the future? So you think although we are going back in person, you think the Zoom call thing is going to be here to stay? I mean, what is your prediction about that?
It will be client-driven, not lawyer-driven. I think that the old days when we would hop on a plane to do a 1 or 2 hour witness interview, maybe for the CEO or the CFO, but in general, the general counsel or whoever's supervising you, the client's going to say, I don't want to spend money on that. It's a 2 hour witness interview or a 1 hour interview. Do it over the phone. On pitches, where historically you'd fly a big team out, I think clients have gotten very comfortable evaluating potential hires on the screen. So it will continue. I would have said in court, I always would prefer to be in front of the judge instead of on the screen with her. But I think judges have liked it too. And so the days of going into a courtroom where there are case management conferences and having 100 matters on the docket, and the roar of the meters is deafening from old lawyers sitting there. I think a lot of judges are going to switch to doing things online. So although I think personal presence will remain a factor, I think that in many, if not most, client interactions, it'll just be easier for the client to click a button than to schedule. And so I think it's too early to be sure, but I do think for the younger lawyers I work with, I try to get them to focus on this is now an advantage to them. In general, younger lawyers are it's easier to own the display than it may be to own the boardroom.
Yeah,
I think it's an opportunity for younger lawyers.
Do you find it stifling? I mean, you as the advocate or you as trying to reach out and connect with the client as a service provider, do you find it, stifling? Do you feel like it's not as effective?
I do. With witness interview, a witness interview is always more than asking questions. It's often the beginning of a confidence building process that will lead to your representation of that witness at either deposition or a hearing or trial. And so it's important for them to be sitting there with you, and you can get them coffee and find out about their life. In a way, it's a little harder to schmooze on Zoom than it is in a conference room. And with respect to judges, I find it to be a significant disadvantage to do it online, because the joy of doing an argument in court is you go a couple hours early, you watch her as she does other cases, you see how she reacts. The judge is looking down on who's in the courtroom. Oh, that guy in the bow tie, what's he doing here? His matter isn't until the 11 o'clock calendar. And there's just something about being in the room with the decision maker. And I think you lose a little of that on Zoom, but it is what it is. I certainly will have some greater opportunity to go back in court. But I do think that although judges may have, because of the whole camera in the courtroom thing, and generally courtroom technology has lagged the business world. But now that judges have embraced it and figured out how to do it and how to do breakout rooms, that was like discovering the new world for judges to figure out how to do breakout rooms. So I think that many of them will stick to where it's had the greatest impact is in mediations. A Zoom mediation is a waste of time. The whole point of mediation, if you have a talented mediator, is you start to control the chemical interactions among people. You use shame, cajoling, and it's just much harder to do if you're here and then they say, okay, I'm going into this other Zoom screen. I don't think it's nearly as effective. I think of all the things in the legal world. I can't comment about deal negotiations because you'd have to talk to my colleagues about that. But in terms of settling cases, I think those are almost certainly going to revert to human, not virtual.
That makes sense. What about taking depositions? Do you think that works pretty well or not?
Better. I actually, at the very beginning of lockdown, I wrote an article about reinventing depositions. It's on my eponymous website, www.borisfeldman.com. And I will, because you've hosted me today, I will be glad to put on ads for free for Hsu Enterprises. But I thought, given that depositions are moving to virtual, now would be a good time to rethink them, because they're the worst thing about the litigation world. They're wasteful, humiliating, expensive. Nothing about them makes sense. So I had hoped that at the beginning of lockdown, people wouldn't just move the depositions to video, but they'd rethink them, and that has not happened. So yes, they can be done well by online depositions, but they're not that much less wasteful. They're still, the conventional wisdom is don't get to anything good until 3 p.m. I don't think that's changed.
Boris, as a side comment, did your parents also mention that you had this sense of humor, this dry sense of humor when they were talking about your argumentative skills? I don't know. Did they mention that by any chance?
Where do you think I got it? eBay?
So let me go back and ask you. You sort of said, the younger generation, they might have an advantage controlling the screen. But then what about the fact that they might even have less skills when we have the personal interaction? And they won't have a chance to develop those skills. What are your thoughts on that? Is that a concern?
I think it's one of the greatest challenges facing the legal profession, not just law firms, but public interest organizations and government agencies as well. This remains a profession where the best learning is by mentorship. A firm can have as many training programs as it wants. It becomes sort of the CLE industrial complex, and they can have lots of videos for young associates to watch. There are few things as good as having a young lawyer in a room learning from a more experienced lawyer. So one way I've tried to tempt my younger colleagues back into the office is when I have meetings, you can't just add a lot of people to a Zoom meeting, because even if you tell the client you're not charging for it, they wonder if you're charging for it. And it's like, wow, why are there so many Freshfields people on the screen? But you can have them sit behind the monitor. And so when my associates are in, I'll often say to them, I have an interesting call with this client in England this afternoon. Do you want to come sit in? And they understand why I'm not just sending them the link to click on, and they like it. So I think that lawyer partners, mentors, are going to have to work extra hard to make sure that they're including younger lawyers so that they can learn things. And that goes M&A, corporate, whatever the practice area. I think that's going to be very important. And I worry that look, we're building a new firm here. It's 1743, but in Silicon Valley, we're a year and a half. We're barely trolling. So I worry that for lawyers who have joined us and lawyers who've joined the profession in the last 2 years, they've lost out on a lot of that acculturation and training by absorption. So I think that's a big, when people come back to the office, there are going to be a lot of things everybody worries about. But one of the things, in addition to culture building, they're going to need to focus on making up for that gap in hands-on training.
I used to be at a firm called Venture Law Group, which you well know, and of course, Craig Johnson, Craig Johnson, and he talked about that all the time. He analogized the law firm learning as to an Italian artist. It's very much an artisan kind of thing. So you really learn. I mean, he always used that metaphor when he talked about the training of young lawyers.
Craig was one of the greatest lawyers in the history of the Valley.
Oh.
Really up there, sort of the Larry Sonsini, Gordy Davidson level. And what he built with VLG was extraordinary.
Oh,
And he always, one reason that when he started VLG, so many lawyers went with him was because, in a way, Craig was always a teacher. He was a tinkerer.
yes,
He liked to
yes,
take things apart and put them back together, but
yes.
he loved being a teacher.
She did.
And I worry, it's something we talked about when we opened the office here, that we wanted to divert from the normal law firm training path, which is outsource it to an education department. That's easy. Then the partners don't have the responsibility, and they can say, oh, we have fifth year associate mock depositions. Those all have a place and can be useful, but you probably learned more from working with Craig on a deal than you did from many hours of CLE tapes.
That's totally true. Totally true. Tell me about that angel logo you showed it to us on the hat. What is that? I don't know.
The firm was founded by Mr. Freshfield in 1743. That's the Archangel Michael holding a spear. And Freshfield, the original Freshfield, came from a middle class, not an aristocratic family, but he made his way up in the world, became a lawyer instead of a clerk. And he wanted a coat of arms. So he went to the coat of arms department, sort of like DMV, but shorter lines. And at the coat of arms department, he found that there was another Freshfield in England who had that coat of arms with the Archangel Michael. And so he got permission to use that. And that has been the icon of the firm. The graphic image has evolved over time. It began with a Crusader helmet with a cross on it. As Freshfields expanded to the Middle East, that was not the most culturally sensitive icon. Originally, the spear pointed down. In some Asian cultures, that had bad feng shui. So they inverted the spear so that it pointed up. The Archangel Michael is an interesting character. He is a major figure in the three major monotheistic religions. In Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. He appears in all three. And he is the icon of Freshfields. And at least in the California office, we refer to him as our guy Mike. And we feel that he's a distinguishing feature and also sort of a fun thing for a law firm to have.
I take it when you were looking at the firm, that was one of the things you liked most about it?
No, it was kind of a Rorschach test. I used to think it was a butterfly. I didn't get what it was. And then I said, what's with the butterfly? And they said, no, it's an angel. And I thought, whoa, am I going to have to be baptized to join this law firm? And so then I researched it, and I realized, for example, in the Old Testament, when before Sodom and Gomorrah fall, the three angels who approach Abraham in the desert, the one who tells him and Sarah that they'll have a child in the next year is the Archangel Michael. And then he exits stage left, and the other two angels go on to Sodom and Gomorrah.
Well, turning to a topic that's of interest to me as a legal recruiter, I understand you started your own recruiting program at Freshfields, something that I believe is maybe even your brainchild. Tell me a little bit about that.
So Freshfields last month launched a program called the Returners, and it aims to take people, mainly women, who've dropped out of the profession because of family obligations, dropped out for a long time. At law firms generally have gotten pretty good if you take an extended maternity leave or something. They're pretty good about that. But some people, mainly women, have said, okay, I've got 2 now, or I've got 3, and I just can't do this anymore. And so they go out for a long time, and it's very hard. I know this from friends who've done it. It's very hard to get back into the profession. No matter how well trained you were and how credentialed you are. Historically, law firms have had a little tunnel vision on whom they want to hire, and all the hiring algorithms coincide. So The returners program is a combination of two things. One, I know it sounds funny to hear law firms doing anything because it's right or from the goodness of their heart, but part of this is as a tangible gesture to take platitudes about DEI and turn them into deliverables. So part of it is we wanted to try to open the profession a little more to working moms. The other part is pecuniary. There's a shortage of talent in the legal profession today. That's why you are probably busier than you've been since the dot-com boom. Their law firms, good law firms, are very busy. And the number of top students coming out of top law schools hasn't really grown appreciably. So you have very high demand in limited supply. So my partner, Sarah Solom, who runs the Silicon Valley office, we sat down and thought, okay, are there any talent pools that we haven't tapped? And the glaring one is women who dropped out. They're harder to reach because you can't just go on LinkedIn and say, okay, who's in such and such department at this firm or at that company? And many of them have been out for a long time, 5 years, 10 years. And many lawyers have to be persuaded that this is a worthwhile venture because they always say, oh, but they've been raising their kids, or they left and were a realtor for a while. How do you bring them back in? But I'm hopeful that not only will we do some good, but we'll get some very fine lawyers for our clients. So we launched it last month. We did it as a pilot in the Silicon Valley office because what I've learned is in a firm with 29 offices in 19 countries, sometimes you can short circuit things by saying, oh, it's a pilot. And we're Californians, so that they know we're flaky to begin with. But within a day of launching it, women in the New York and DC offices reached out and said, I'm a returner and I want to do this here. That they had taken off long times. And then immediately the Paris office reached out and said, we're very interested in this. Could you tell us how it goes? The most exciting thing about it, if you post something on LinkedIn, you can see where the views come from.
Yes.
And the views on our announcement of the returners are coming from all of our leading competitors, both in the United States and in Europe. So what that says to me is a lot of really top firms are saying, wait, maybe we should do this. So yes. I view as the ultimate metric of success, not how many women Freshfields brings back, but how many sort of the top tier legal profession brings back.
Very interesting. And is your program just limited to former lawyers at Freshfields, or just former practicing lawyers who want to come back to the profession? It's not limited to Freshfield returning.
The latter. It's not even targeted at Freshfields.
Oh, I see. Got it.
And we've put up a website. I should probably have a Chiron stream. Call now. As maybe on the website we could then put a scene on Hsu Untied. But it's targeted at people who just sort of said, I can't do this. And at my old firm, some of the very greatest talent I worked with was people who had dropped out and come back. And in my career, I've seen many women who were at the top of the profession and then just said, I need to step out of this for a while. And at the legal profession, you know this is your business. It makes it very hard to get back in.
Very much so, yeah. Well, I'll be very interested. It sounds really interesting. I'll be very interested in hearing how it turns out, or how it goes.
Thank you.
So last thing, Boris, it's been a great conversation. I understand you have a very interesting hobby, which I also like a lot, which I understand is street photography or photography. Tell me a little bit about that hobby.
So in the same way that you're obsessed with footwear, I'm obsessed with faces. I guess you could say our interests are at different ends of the human spectrum. So I like taking pictures of people's faces. I'm a street photographer. I've done it for many years. I post one face every day. at www.dailyfaces.net. I don't sell ads on it, so I don't get more money if you look at it. And then at the end of the year, I don't do it on the weekend. So usually I have about 230 or 250 faces a year. My family at the end of the year picks the top 16. We have an elaborate process we go through. It's better than a Florida election. And we then do March Madness style elimination brackets of the Sweet 16 until we come down to the face of the year. And then one of my daughters puts together a book every year of the daily faces of that year. So in exchange for you having invited me to this program, we're going to do a shot of you that I hope will become the face, if not the tongue, of Hsu Untied.
And what is it about faces that fascinates you so much?
That's how you steal the soul, through the eyes. You'll notice if you look at my faces, they tend to be serious. It's hard to suck someone's soul out of them, Dementor-like, if they're doing cheese. But if they've got a serious look on their face, you can look into their soul through the eyes.
I'm sure you've seen one of my all-time favorite movies is the documentary about Vivian Mayer. You must know about her, I'm assuming.
One of the greatest unrecognized figures in modern American photography.
Yeah, really, really. Well, Boris, this has been a fascinating conversation. I so enjoyed it. I never dreamed I would laugh as much as you have. I think I've been over 200 guests. I believe I've laughed more with you than almost any. So how's that for a compliment?
Never underestimate the value of a cheap prop. Thank you, Richard.
This is Richard Hsu and Boris Feldman.